Visit us at Eduvvo. Thank you for calling Eduvvo.
So what's causing this issue here? Which we also kind of saw when we added that keyword. There we also have this strange warning. The problem is that this content is not scrollable. Let's understand how a column, and by the way also a row, works by default. A column takes the full available height, a row the full available width. But with that, of course, I mean the height on the screen, not an infinite amount of height. It doesn't automatically add a scrolling functionality. That means that a column tries to squeeze all children it has into itself. But if the child widgets have their own heights, like this one has, we define the height of a single transaction by the height of this box bar or font size and so on. So if these have a height which the column can't shrink, then at some point of time the child widgets won't fit into the column anymore. And then we need a solution, and the solution is to add scrolling to the column, and you can also add scrolling to a row. The fix is to go to our main Dart file and wrap the overall column that holds all our content on the page in a new widget. Now here is no predefined snippet for that, but we can wrap it with a new widget. And the widget we want to use here is a single child scroll view. Now this adds some scrolling functionality to this column, which otherwise can't be scrolled. And therefore now, you already see that we get no error here anymore when I open the keyboard, which is good. Now if I add a couple of transactions here real quick, so that we have too many transactions to squeeze them all into one column, then you see I can now scroll, because single child scroll view adds scrolling functionality. Now here's one important note. You have to add the single child scroll view on this level here, so as the body element itself. It wouldn't work if you add single child scroll view only around user transactions or only inside of the transaction list here, let's say around this column. This would not work like this because the single child scroll view then wouldn't be able to set up scrolling correctly. It basically wouldn't be able to identify the container height in which it should scroll. What you can do, however, is you can not use single child scroll view here in the main Dart file. So remove that and remove that extra parentheses. And instead in transaction list, you can wrap it with a container, which you give a clearly defined height. And important here is that you choose a height that does fit on the screen, like maybe 300. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not getting any warnings here. For example, if I chose 500 here, I would get an error here. And of course, the available height depends on the device size. We'll later also have a look at how you can find out how much space is available. But here on my emulator, just because I want to show this, if I work with 300 here, now we have a clearly defined container into which this column may go. So now the column does not size itself after the amount of space it needs for its children. Instead, it knows how much space it can take, 300 pixels. And now you can wrap the column here with a single child scroll view. And that single child scroll view now also knows that it must scroll inside of this 300 pixels box. So now here, we still get that warning, however, because I removed the overall scroll view on the entire page, which means that when the soft keyboard enters the page doesn't know where to go. But now we can scroll into that sublist down there. Now this can also be a useful pattern, but in our app here, we definitely also need the scrolling on the entire list, because we otherwise get that problem here where our soft keyboard actually pushes the page up a bit, and that then leads to exceeded page boundaries. By the way, in detail what's happening here is that Flutter tries to always scroll the input, which we're editing, into view, and therefore it insets the page by the height of that text field, so that that text input can never be below that soft keyboard. It's not the case here, but it could be below the soft keyboard on smaller devices. That's why the height of that text field is always added as a padding above the soft keyboard, and that's exactly the problem we have here. That height is added here, but since the page can't scroll away, we try to add height on a page that's already fully occupied with content. So that's the problem we have here, and to avoid that, we definitely have to wrap our overall column here with a single scroll view. So there is no way around that. So here we have the single child scroll view around our overall column, and now the entire page is scrollable, which leads to no visual difference when that keyboard opens up, but technically there is a difference, and we can see that, by the way, if we rotate the device. Now if I tap in here, you see that this gets scrolled up a bit by Flutter to make room for the keyboard, and that is exactly what happens when we have a scroll view and what's not possible if we don't have one. It's a convenience feature by Flutter so that we can always reach our text input and see what we're entering, but it only works if the page is scrollable for pages that are packed with content or on smaller devices. Well, in our list of transactions here also is scrollable because here we still have our separate container with a single child scroll view, which of course is something you could now also delete again, but you can also leave it here.